Hello, everybody. This is Rick Manning from Washington, D.C., Americans for Limited Government. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that are going on. And, some of this stuff, you just can't make it up. And it's almost unbelievable. And a lot of this is some of the things we're going to talk about have been in the news, but I think they're important to just put into context. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was, Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, and the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, have really turned the tables on the left as it comes to the immigration issue, have forced the media, the left-wing media, to start covering immigration, start covering the fact that we're having hundreds of thousands of people come across our border every single month under the Biden administration's open borders policy. They've done it through just basically jujitsu, political jujitsu. I'm going to focus today on, and Greg Abbott was the one who started this from Texas, and he deserves a tremendous amount of credit for making illegal immigration the problem of those who support illegal immigration, rather than leaving as the sole problem of the people who happen to live on the border and aren't all that happy about it. So so whether it's sending illegals to Chicago or Washington, D.C. or New York City, there's been the left, all these sanctuary cities, they have gone nuts in terms of how do we respond? We've got a couple hundred illegal aliens that are in our midst now, and what do we do? What do we do? I mean, we're a city of 500,000. In Chicago's case, we're a city of 2.5 million. What do we do? How do we handle this massive strain on our public systems? And the most ironic, of course, was Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, who recognized Florida is not on the border. Florida is a border state only because President Biden's immigration policy is to export people from Texas to Florida or other states around the country. And so that's what we had. We had people being sent from Texas to Florida, and Ron DeSantis, his people said, well, this is a problem. They complained about it. But you know what happened? But then he said, well, let's try to do something about it. And he sent 50 illegal immigrants from Venezuela, put them on a plane, sent them to Martha's Vineyard, to the place where Barack Obama has chosen to own a house well in excess of $10 million, right there on the coast. We know it's going to be worth nothing in 10 years because global warming is going to wash it all away with the rising sea levels. But, that's so they're in Martha's Vineyard. They just don't have room for 50 illegal aliens in Martha's Vineyard. So what did they do? What did this sanctuary city do? This sanctuary city went off and said, well, they're very proud of this, actually. They were very proud that, in fact, I'm going to read you exactly what the state representative from who represents Martha's Vineyard actually said. This is quoting a PBS article, Public Broadcast Service, no conservative outlet there. State Rep Dylan Fernandez. This is quoting Dylan Fernandez. Our island jumped into action, putting together 50 beds, giving everyone a good meal, providing a play area for the children, making sure people have the health care and support they need. We are a community that comes together to support immigrants. Yeah. And then they called the military and they deported the 50 illegal aliens from Martha's Vineyard and sent them to a military base for the federal government to figure out what to do with them. Folks, that's the opposite of what the sanctuary cities say they want. The sanctuary city, actually, the definition, it refers to municipal jurisdiction. That's what they are. Typically in North America, that limit their cooperation with the national government's effort to enforce immigration law. So let me get this straight. Martha's Vineyard gave them a meal, gave them a cot, and deported them from Martha's Vineyard with the help of the federal government. I don't know. That's a different definition of sanctuary city. And if that was done in Del Rio, Texas, it would be called a vast human rights violation. If it's done in Austin, Texas, or San Antonio, or anywhere on any of the border cities in the border, it would be decried by the left. But apparently, if you happen to have Barack Obama living on your island, you can define a sanctuary city any way you want to. It's a sanctuary until people come who are asking for sanctuary. So Ron DeSantis really showed the light in terms of what's really happening, the hypocrisy of the left, the hypocrisy of these so-called do-gooders who want the rest of the country to pay the price of all the costs of mass open borders without bearing any of it themselves. And that's even being slightly discomforted. The reason this matters, and I know this is kind of old news, but the reason it matters is one of the things that the Republicans have had a hard time doing because they've avoided all issues is reminding people of what actually is going wrong in this country. And so people overwhelmingly in this country, they support an immigration policy. They don't support an open border. They can have compassion for people coming across the border, who are escaping poverty and hardship. You can have compassion for people, but that doesn't mean that you just eliminate all rules as it relates to coming into our country. And so, and yet the Republicans have had a hard time getting any media attention on this issue, even though we've had record numbers of people coming into our country illegally over the last year and a half. So it's a massive problem. It's beyond anything. The Border Patrol's overwhelmed, deliberately so, and our border's overrun. So what Governor DeSantis and Governor Abbott and Governor Ducey from Arizona have done is they've basically put the problem into the lap of those who are advocating the open borders. And in doing so, they've made it a political issue. They've drawn it into the public discussion and forced people to deal with it. And the last thing the Democrats want to be talking about is illegal immigration across the border. And the last thing they want to be doing is talking about it if it's Muriel Bowser, the mayor of DC, who wanted to call out the National Guard and have FEMA and everybody else coming out to deal with the hundreds of illegal aliens that were besetting her beloved DC, city of 600,000, ignoring the fact that cities of 3, 4, 5, 6,000 in South Texas are regularly dealing with the flow of illegals far exceed the people who arrived into DC. So they made it into a national issue. And they're forcing people to start talking about what kind of government do we want? What do we want in this? And unfortunately, one of the things that people in Washington, D.C. is trying to do is they forget that there is a way that Congress can fight this. They forget that there is a solution that Congress can push. And, it's September, we're going to have a funding bill. It's probably a continuing resolution pass at the end of this month. And they won't do likely they won't do anything on it. But here's the truth. Truth is, if the Republicans in the Senate said, we're going to finish the wall, and we're going to compel Joe Biden to finish the wall. You specify exactly where the wall needs to be finished. You can do all the specs for what needs to be done. You can essentially compel Joe Biden to spend a certain amount of money on finishing the wall. Okay, they can do that, and Joe Biden has to comply. They could say, we're going to force the administration to engage in the return to Mexico policy and say we deny all funds for this and for various other things unless this policy is instituted and we see a significant decline in illegal immigrants coming across the border. They could increase the number of Border Patrol that are deployed along the border, and they could decrease the number of IRS agents. Those are all things that they can do because Congress has the power of the purse. And while they won't do it more than likely between now and the end of the fiscal year, which is September 30th, they'll likely kick the can And we would hope they'll kick the can to February or March of next year. This is more likely they'll kick it to December 10 or so. And then we'll have to fight this battle again in December. But they have the power simply by saying, if you don't engage, if you don't deal with this problem and other problems, we're going to not deny you the funds to run your agency. We're going to deny you funds to do stuff you want to do. And a simple amount of basic strategy and a basic willingness to fight on the Senate side, because all the leverage is on the Senate side. The Democrats need to get 10 senators to 10 Republicans to vote for the funding bill in order to pass it. They need 60, not 51. Kamala Harris doesn't come to play on this. So you have they need 60 votes to pass it. That means they need 10 Republicans. So ultimately, the Republicans have leverage to try to compel the Biden administration to take rational efforts to end illegal immigration if they want to. And I would say, if deportation is good enough for Brock's Island, Martha's Vineyard, then deportation needs to be good enough for America. So, folks, this is just pretty straightforward stuff. Let's see. Hugh Pemberton, you've got an interesting question. I wanted to show it. It has nothing to do with this, but is there any way to figure out, find out how I voted for president last election? I really want to know if somebody used my name. Okay. Hugh, you cannot find out who anybody voted for. Okay. That's confidential information, but you can find out if they have it down that you voted. And if you did, based on this question, I'm going to make an assumption that for whatever reason you did not vote in the last election, and as a result, you can go to your local county. It's county clerk, registrar of voters. The official has a lot of different names in different places, but go to the person who oversees elections and ask to see the voter, the list of people who voted in the last election, and just be frank with them. Go by and say, I want to see if it is recorded that I voted or not. And you can do that. And it's a regular tally. This is nothing secret. It's public information. So that's how you go about doing that. So if anybody has any questions about whether or not you voted, that's something, or recorded as voting. If you wonder, you send in your ballot by mail and you want to know if it's recorded as being received and voted, you can go and check with your county clerk. That's an easy thing to do. It is a harder thing. There's no way to know how your vote was recorded because we have a secret ballot in this country, and that means that we actually don't want to have it is public record. Well, Rick Manning voted for this person, and Hugh Pemberton voted for this person, and because the right to a secret ballot is the right to a secure ballot, and without that, we end up in a circumstance where people can be coerced and harassed after the fact for how they voted. So we want to avoid that. But yes, you can find out if your vote was recorded, if they did in fact receive your ballot and was marked as having voted or not. So that's a great question, Hugh, and I'm glad I was able to help you out with that. Martha Vineyard community should have welcomed them with open arms. Isn't it astonishing, Patricia, how people are such hypocrites? By the way, Martha's Vineyard has throughout the summer, and the summer season's over, Martha's Vineyard has a tremendous amount of tourism. And so they have the accommodations for 50 people. They certainly have the ability to house them. And they chose not to do that. And they chose not to welcome, as a sanctuary city, not to welcome them because, it's I'm sure, even though after the fact, as I read before, their state rep tried to virtue signal about how wonderful they were. Well, let me just paraphrase what the state rep said. State rep said, "Yeah, we got him some McDonald's. We put him on a cot and we sent him on their way." Okay, that's what happened, and that's a not exactly the hospitality that they were talking about when they attacked President Trump, and they did the virtue signaling conversation about being uh, a sanctuary area. So that's the reality. Let's see what else we have here. Um, let's see here. Thought aiding and abetting was against the law. Does New York give illegal driver's licenses? Bill, I don't know if New York. I don't think the state of New York does, but the city of New York. I don't think. I do not know if the state of New York gives them driver's licenses. I know some jurisdictions do, and that is actually one of the things that's happening. That ironically, the left seems to figure out. It seems to be able to get IDs into the hands of those who are here illegally, while claiming that those who are here legally can't afford to get IDs, and hence we don't want to have voter ID requirements for voting. There's a certain amount of irony to that, which I think everybody doesn't miss on this call, on this video. But yeah, I'm sorry I don't have the exact information on New York giving illegal driver's licenses, but I think you should be able to figure that out looking at Google. This administration, Johnny Quest, I used to love Johnny Quest when I was a kid. So love Johnny Quest with his dog Bandit. This administration is a real laughingstock. Vote red because our country is dying slowly but surely, and nobody in our government. And the administration it's a dangerous laughingstock. There's a meme out or a video out today where President Biden once again gets lost on a stage and is wandering around on the stage, and he's clearly disoriented. And we all sit there and people go, they laugh or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, I've made a decision that I'm no longer going to make fun of this president for for the things he's not doing and for his incapacities, because you know what? He was able to stand in front of the Independence Hall and make perhaps the most dangerous speech that I've ever heard. A speech that was filled with hate and a call to arms for people to attack supporters of Donald Trump. 2 weeks later, we saw a Biden supporter attack and run over an 18-year-old kid in North Dakota because he was a supporter of Donald Trump. That's the kind of paranoia and craziness that gets unleashed under these circumstances. And it's why I try to be, for however small the platform is, I try to be somebody who is circumspect on how we approach things, because in terms of not just yelling and screaming and getting people all worked up. And the reason for that is I was an NRA lobbyist, National Rifle Association lobbyist, for 9 years when I was a kid. It's kind of where I trained. And the fact of the matter is, I was always cognizant that I was talking to people who and trying to get people to come to rallies and to fight for constitutional freedom, because that was where the power laid. But you always had to be cognizant that you wanted to do it within a peaceful framework. And so the language necessarily is always at least a little bit muted. And I think that's important, and we've lost that, and on both sides, truthfully. But Joe Biden's Independence Day speech was reprehensible and was a dog whistle, not only to government employees to go ahead with taking people's cell phones who had a conversation one time in their life about January 6th, or who were deemed close associates of President Trump, and basically engage in a wholesale FBI attack on people close to Trump. That's a, it's not just that. It's what people outside the Beltway heard, and what they heard was Trump Trump supporters are a danger to democracy. Democracy is the fundamental value which we all must hold dear. Hence, Trump supporters are dangerous and must be, and they are a threat to that and must be dealt with. And we've seen 5 6 years of people, well, 6 7 years now, of Antifa types attacking Trump supporters, coming out of rallies, coming out of other events. We've seen the Trump's inaugural in 2017 rather, where as some of you attended that inaugural, we had to walk through a passageway that was created to prevent protesters from being able to attack us as attenders of the inauguration. They're trying to block the inauguration and the celebrations attendant to that. So we had to walk through crazy crowds. We saw crazy crowds around the White House when Donald Trump accepted the Republican nomination in 2020. I had to go through crazy crowds to try to get to my car and be safe, and literally was holed up at the Trump Hotel until 3 a.m. when the Metropolitan Police would let us go and actually go to our car. So that's so let's just be clear. In fact, in personal life, across the street from my office, I was having lunch with somebody after coming from the Trump White House in a meeting. I was talking to them about it. I was in a suit. And I had somebody there who, with his two young male children, starts screaming in the middle of the restaurant and attempting and wanting to be in a fight. And truthfully, I kind of egged him on a little bit because it was funny. But that's the truth. Being a Trump supporter there's violence against you every single day. And at least there was during the Trump administration. Department of Homeland Security Secretary had people protesting in front of her house. We've got Supreme Court justices now having people protesting in front of their houses and trying to intimidate justice. We have the left active and motivated, trying to intimidate people to accept what they're doing to this country. And I can tell you, I understand anybody who doesn't want to wear a MAGA hat. I understand anybody who doesn't want to put a Trump bumper strip on your car. Fully get it. The fact of the matter is, there's more of us than there are them. And the key thing we have to do is we have to make certain that in states like Arizona, that Blake Masters wins the Senate seat, that Kari Lake wins the governorship, that the attorney general candidate for the Republicans wins the attorney general slot. We have to make sure we win states like Arizona, like Georgia, like Florida for that matter. We have to win Pennsylvania. Ron Johnson has to be reelected to the Senate in Wisconsin. Those are the places where and we have to win the governorship in Wisconsin. Those are the kind of places where it really, really, really matters, because that's where the whole arc for this country is going to go, is based on what happens in those elections. So even though the left is crazy, if you are in those states or somebody in those states, encourage them. If they have a need for somebody to walk precincts in those states, and you have the capacity to go and help, take a weekend trip and go sign up to help, turn out the vote in those states. We cannot allow the crazy left to win this election. We cannot allow the crazy left to win this election. And so we have to just double down and work harder. We have to contact anybody on our list and say, if you haven't voted, you need to vote in these some places have mail-in ballots or absentee where you have to request them. Remind people how important it is. And you can use the hypocrisy of the left in Martha's Vineyard as one of the prime examples of how they don't mind if those 50 illegal aliens end up in your town, but don't you dare send them to theirs. Remind them of that fact, because the left is creating two Americas, and our America are the dumping ground for their social policies, while they want to maintain the pristine environment that they've paid so much money to be able to be engaged in. So that's the answer to the question, Johnny. I know you're not Johnny Quest, but I just love that name. It's borders out of control. Once again, I think I've given the what can be done, and the key thing to getting that done is you have to win control of the House and Senate, or at least the House, one of the two, and two, you have to be willing to fight over it, and that means in December when they try to do another funding bill, that we force a funding bill to be not passed, but just a continuing resolution, which keeps spending at the same level as it is now. A continuing resolution to be passed into February or March, because then the Republicans will control the gavels. Then the Republicans will have a majority. Then the Republicans, assuming that we win in November, then we will have an opportunity to actually fight from a high ground position and force Joe Biden to defend the indefensible, what's going on in this country. So, folks, that's the battleground for the next 6 months. It's doable, it's winnable, but we have to have the people who are in Congress right now begin that fight. And then we can finish that fight if we get the funding bill moved into February, March. We can finish that fight then, and we can have it. And a lot of people go, "Oh, government's shutting down, all that garbage." Bottom line is, America's worth fighting for, and 17% of the government is what's affected when we do these so-called government shutdowns. And every single one of those employees, whether they're working or not, still get paid. So there is no practical negative effect of the government shutdown, in spite of the fact that they'll try to barricade some national parks and stuff like that to try to create pain for the average person. Truth is, that's the fight. That's where we can win, and that's where we have to focus our legislators, our federal legislators, and get them to focus on actually doing something. Because if they're not willing to do something, they don't hold much value for us, do they? I'm going to pop over to another subject. I know the immigration stuff's hot, but I wanted to talk about something a little bit different, and that is, and then I figure out how to get this thing squared away here. I wrote something last night and it published today. Didn't get out on Facebook till about an hour ago, but it was on reforming Social Security, third rail of politics. And one of the things that we're seeing in the labor markets is that we don't have enough labor. We don't have enough people who are actually laboring. When we're talking about immigration, on one hand, people say, well, we're bringing what about immigrants? Well, the fact is our immigration policy is insane. It doesn't actually target people who are going to give best value to the economy. And bringing in people whose expectation is that they're going to be taken care of rather than having to work for a living doesn't actually accomplish any of those purposes. So we need an immigration policy that actually makes sense. But until we can get an immigration policy that makes sense, it doesn't include amnesty and the like. Until we can get an immigration policy that makes sense, and that's probably not till 2025, we have this opportunity, and it's something I think people can get behind from both parties. There's two groups of people who are not participating in the workforce. Okay, one's obvious, and that is when you reach retirement age, you retire and you're not in the workforce anymore. Okay, this is not what we're talking about with Social Security. Isn't a plan to make it so people can't retire. It is a plan to make it so your Social Security benefits aren't taxed, and to make it so if you choose to accept Social Security at the age of 62, you aren't punished if you want to continue working till you're 65, 66 and a half, 67. It goes up to 67 here in a couple of years. And so right now you're punished. Because they say if you make above a certain amount of money, you have to start paying back the Social Security. And and as a result, it discourages people from participating and staying fully involved in the workforce. And this is particularly important for people who work in trades where there's where you're doing backbreaking work. And, it's a little different if you're sitting behind a desk like I do. But if you're sitting there, you're actually working on a roof, you're working, as a glazier, doing glass work or whatever it is, that's hard physical labor. And at a certain point in your life, that becomes much more difficult to do. And so retiring at 62 and getting your Social Security benefits at 62 might make sense. But what doesn't make sense is to tell that person with all that expertise that they can't work at Home Depot and make full time, continue to make money and collect the Social Security. Okay. We need people in the workforce. And our current Social Security system is set up, last real major reform was 83, has been set up to get people out of the workforce. And so we've got a system set up to get people out of the workforce because 40 years ago, we had a lot of people who were coming into the workforce. That was the policy. That's what people wanted to do. So why we end up with 65 being a mandatory retirement age and things like that. Today, our problem is we don't have enough people in the workforce. And the reason we don't have enough people in the workforce is because we have people retiring at they're retiring. Let's just say that. And many of these people don't necessarily want to retire, but but they're not allowed to actually work a part-time job or do something else because of the way the system works. That's stupid. We want to encourage work. We want to discourage not work. If somebody wants to retire, they've earned the retirement, they've paid in all the years. I don't have any problem with anybody retiring. Okay, I'm near that category now. But the fact of the matter is, if somebody wants to continue working, and they want to supplement their income by collecting Social Security at 62, they ought to be able to. Let's not discourage work. And that's what our current system does. And the idea of taxing Social Security benefits, it came into being in 83. Ronald Reagan signed it as part of Social Security reform to keep the system solvent. But the fact of the matter is, it is punitive. It doesn't make sense. And it is once again, if you want to make it so people say, gee, I want to continue working, what you do is you say, I'm not going to tax your Social Security benefits. So if you went and you worked and you made $60,000 a year while you're getting Social Security, let's say you're getting $2,000 a month in Social Security, and you're paying $60,000 a year. Suddenly, with that $2,000 a month, that throws you into a tax bracket with $84,000. Okay, which means the Social Security money is causing you to have to pay a higher tax on that money because it's a higher tax bracket than what it's in your regular salary. Let's get rid of the tax on Social Security benefits. Let's allow people to go work and not have their benefits be negatively impacted based upon the fact that they are working and putting it into a higher tax bracket. It's that simple. There's no tricks here. And let's face it, if you're 65 years old, 66 years old, and you went to work, I went to work when I was 14 years old, my first job, where I first found out who that FICA fellow was. And you've been working for, let's say, 40 years. You've been paying into Social Security for 40 years. And if you continue, if it is absurd to say, well, we let the government hold on to the money for 40 years, but now we're going to, when you want to get your money back, when you get your payments back, you're going to have to pay. It's stupid. It's absurd, and it provides a disincentive to continue working. And our country needs people in the workforce. That's the primary thing that's going to hold us back in terms of growth in the future. And so we need people in the workforce. It is a need based on a lot of different reasons, but truth is, there's a simple thing that can be done. I'm now going to deal with a different area, and that's disability policy. Our disability policy is cruel and it is terrifying for people with disabilities. If you are on Social Security disability, everybody wants to focus on people who are abusing the system and the like. Well, let me tell you what abuse is. Abuse is when you're getting paid disability and you're making, $1,200 a month on disability payment. But but they've got an income cap. And if you make more personally, if you go out and say, I can't live on $1,200 a month, and not many can, and you go out and you make too much money by working at a McDonald's or working as writing code or working in anywhere. If you make too much money, you lose your health coverage, your Social Security health coverage, or your disability health coverage. Losing health coverage is a death sentence for many people on disabilities because they can't get it through private sector. Losing your health coverage is a death sentence. So what happens is people with disabilities don't even try to get a job and only about 37% of people with disabilities are in the workforce right now. A vast majority of the people with disabilities are either mobility impaired, blind, or deaf. Those are your primary, that's where most of the people with disabilities are at in terms of your traditional disabilities. You've got people with diabetes and other diseases that have been added into the American Disability Act under George W. Bush. But ultimately, if you're traditional, what you think of as being disabled, you've got people who are mobility impaired, people who are hearing impaired, people who are blind, sight impaired. There's absolutely no reason with modern technology that all three of those groups can't be in the workforce every bit as much as everybody else. No reason, except we tell them, if you go into the workforce, we are going to punish you. Once again, eliminate the income cap. You can do a thing like what we do with earned income tax credit, where you have if you make a certain amount of money, as you make money, you get your benefit lowers in terms of how much money you get paid from disability but you never lose money by virtue of working until the payment benefit goes away. But you never lose your health care. If we separate the financial benefit from the health care, we open the door for people who have the capacity to be in the workplace and be productive. We open the door for people who maybe have Down syndrome or a case of or have any number of disabling maladies. We open the door for them to be able to be productive with a self-esteem that goes with that, and be somebody who is contributing to society and our economic growth. And right now, the system we have cruelly denies that. And so that's kind of the third part of that article. I'd encourage you to go to dailytorch.com, check it out. I'm interested in hearing what you have to say about it, because and once again, here's another example. Pam Rubin, why would they allow unvaccinated no money? Okay, so the fact that what happened was the federal government has attacked people who didn't get vaccines and have tried to, this is about letting them in illegal sin, but Pam, the reason for that is obvious. The vaccine stuff's a fraud. And this is going to get me banned off of YouTube, but the vaccine stuff, clearly by their actions, they don't take it as seriously as you would anticipate. And that indicates that they have real doubts about the value of their own policies. I'll just put it that way. Let's see here. That's one of those little lines I'm not supposed to cross. Let's see here. Let's see what else we have in terms of the Yeah, well, Betsy, you're right. Here, in terms of the rhinos, but what I found is we are the Donald Trump factor has created a divide. Okay, and even people in the Republican Party who I don't agree with on some issues, who would be called rhinos, have come together on some critical things like that deal with civil liberties of those who have been abused by the or being abused by the system. And I think there's a coming together that occurs among some. The Liz Cheneys are gone, the Bill Crystals are gone, but I think internally in the Republican House conference right now, it's hard to get them to do much, but I think we're going to be able to get them to do some things, and that's because they're kind of in the same boat now. They got to grab an oar and start pulling. So I've got hope in that regard. Um, Here you go. Dina Gunn, I'm 65. I can't afford to retire. I continue working because I have to. A lot of people in your position, Dina. And the fact of the matter is, if you were able to, let's just say, if you're 65, that means you can get full retirement benefit at 66 and a half. If you were able to get full retirement benefit at 66 and a half and continue working without having taxes taken out of the Social Security, you would effectively be able to take whatever money you were making through your workplace, add to it your Social Security payment, and not and have that money be a total positive in your bank account, allowing you to bolster your savings, bolster your retirement, and create an environment where you would be you'd be much further ahead than you are now. And so there's a lot of people in your shoes, and I have sympathy for you. But it's stupid to say, gee whiz, Dina, if you take your Social Security and we're going to what we're going to do is we're going to punish you. And the money that you have to continue work, you have to continue working, you have to, stay in the workforce. And oh, by the way, then we're going to punish you by taking part of your Social Security out at a higher rate because you are working. We want to avoid that, and I think I think it's something that we can do. Let's see here. Today, we're potential workers with no maturity, no training, no work ethic to put in the labor the older generation had. The older shouldn't have to go back in. David, the older shouldn't have to go back in. I agree with you. However, there's a lot of people who want to keep working, and to make it financially, we want to make it so the system doesn't discourage them from doing so. I think it would be in Japan, they implemented a system that made it so people had to really were compelled to go back in. That's not at all what we're talking about here, because quite honestly, we're trying to take away the disincentives to continue working for those who want to work. And obviously people who don't want to work will benefit also. So that's, just to be clear, that's where we're at on this. Use your last 2 years to judge what you get. What if you were sick? Not fair. Yeah, I don't know what that's referring to, but the way the system works now is you have, if you have 35 years of work, they take your average for 35 years, and they figure out what you get paid for Social Security based on that. Every year you work after 35, if you make more money in that year than you did any of those 35 years, they knock your lowest income year out, and it raises the overall amount that you're going to be getting on Social Security. So that's how that works. So if you were like me, I was working when I was 14. I was working part-time jobs, 7-Eleven, for my parents, but I was still working part-time job for 7-Eleven, and I didn't make a lot of money because I was a kid working for $1.50 an hour, and it was no expectation I was going to make a lot of money. That wasn't the purpose, but I paid FICA and accounted as part of my 35 years. So when that goes away, it knocks off a very low salary and it replaces it with a higher salary, which presumably I'm making now, which I am. because I'm making more than $1.50 an hour in most months. So that's the comparison and contrast and how it works. If you work less than 35 years, it's a little bit different, but it does, if you have to get to 10 years to be able to qualify for Social Security. And so it kind of works against you if you haven't worked all 35 years. But the fact is that will create if you're working and you haven't hit your full 35, then any money that you put in, any year, any payment you make in any work you do counts to the positive for you. Let's see here. They judge what you get for yesterday. The last 2 years, what if you're sick? You've been a lot of, you know, Debbie, I just would like to see the data on that because I've spent a lot of time the last couple of days looking at it, and I think the way I described it is the way it works. But please send me a link. You can send a link to me on it at rmanning@getliberty.org. rmanning@getliberty.org. I'd like to read more about that because if that's true, we need to fix it. Let's see here. Well, I think we're limited to Medicare payment that reduces your monthly retirement for Social Security because this is double taxation. It is interesting. It's the Medicare payment is pretty extreme, and it's right now the base Medicare payment is $170 a month. So you're looking at, you get Schedule A one for it's supposedly for free. It counts for all the money you put in before. And then it's $170 a month minimum for Medicare, and then also whatever you do for Part D, if you in terms of signing for drug coverage, you have to pay money on that as well. So there is a Medicare payment, and not being in that world yet, I didn't know they deduct it from Social Security, but yes, you do get. It seems strange, but you have all that money taken out of Medicare, and then you get to pay again. The truth is both the systems are not exactly solvent. And so there is a problem where they're trying to figure out how to pay for this stuff. But it's it's a promise that was made, and we have to figure out how to make it work better. And perhaps it's really compelling people to get off their private health insurance and get into Medicare at 65. Maybe part of the answer might be to allow people a lot more flexibility if you want to stay on your work plan until you're 70, 75, whenever you want to retire, and really encouraging that process rather than really making it really almost, they twist your arm to get in at 65. And it isn't always the best deal for you. So that's something to think about. Okay, Debbie, you're talking about Social Security disability, and so that's disability payments. That's a different circumstance than Social Security retirement, and I'm not as familiar with that, truthfully, but I appreciate your clarification because if you are drawing early, they do take a look at. They just have a different way of doing it, and I've got some friends who are in the disability world who I will talk to find out exactly what's going on and how to what might be done to try to rectify that. So I appreciate you clarifying that for us, Debbie. I think we've had a good talk here about things, and I'm hoping that what we'll be able to do, there's going to be legislation introduced on Social Security, and it is my hope that we will be able to create changes in Social Security that make it so it makes sense if you want to keep working, and so you aren't punished for keeping working, while also allowing you to keep more of your own money. And that's and I find it to be pretty basic stuff, but we need to fix that. And there's going to be a fight about it. Some people on the Republican side won't like it. It may have to go with some other things that the Democrats want to do. But I think eliminate that what we're talking about, the three things we talked about, would go a long way towards putting, allowing 500,000 to 1 million more people to be in the workforce today than tomorrow than are in it today, simply because they're not being pushed out the door, having to make a choice whether to take their retirement or continue working. If we can make it so it's okay to take your retirement and continue working, well, you know what? America needs workers, willing workers. And just because you're 62, 63, 65, 70 doesn't mean you're ready to retire. And unlike past generations, we don't need the tail end of the baby boom generation to necessarily retire to get out of the way, because quite honestly, we have about 10 million more jobs available right now in America than we have people to fill. So and if we're going to grow as a country and continue growing our economy, we need people filling those jobs. And many people don't feel like they want to end their career at this point. And so let's give them the options. So let's see here. So Social Security question, SSI has a miss when a spouse specifies the survivor's penalty to lose the other benefit. Yeah, that's correct. You do, the way it works is you do get a percentage. I think you have to choose. I'm not sure. I was looking into this recently, and I'm quite honestly haven't quite figured it out yet. But I think what happens is you have to choose if the percentage you get from your spouse is less than you get yourself. I think that the survivor benefit is negligible, but I'll have to look at it, David. I appreciate your talking about that. Debbie, if you go to media@getliberty.org and just send an email to media@getliberty.org, you should be able to get to us. With that, I'm going to go, let's see here, one more. Now, Beverly, I've got to ask you, do you know Evan, my buddy Evan, who has the same last name, who's former county commissioner in Calvert County, Maryland, and now lives down in Florida? So a name that's much more common in Pennsylvania, but Evan's the only one I've ever known who actually has that name. So it's anyway, working people should be able to keep what they've earned. It's sickening. 100%. And I think it's time, every 2 years you get a chance to have a say, and it's time. It's not just enough to vote. We have to get everybody who agrees with us to vote as well. That's the key. Off your elections, low propensity Trump voters are going to determine whether or not Republicans take control in 2023. And if people don't come out to vote, then we lose. If people do come out to vote, then we win. And with that, I'm going to just close out and say thank you very much for joining me today. And I look forward to the next time we get together. And with that, I'm going to say adios.